Come abide with me. Bless you. You know, in times of sunshine and heat, lend themselves to a rather celebratory mood. So it is fitting that the gods saw fit to damp that down a little bit. Because this is a time, not so much of celebration, but of reflection. These are serious times, and so were those in 1967. We welcome you all to this profound event that we're having here today. It was nighttime, and it was hot. The telephone rang in the middle of the night, and someone called my father and said that there was something happening on 12th Street. We were all aroused. He jumped up, left the house, and headed over to his record store, which was called Joe's Record Shop on 12th Street between Philadelphia and Euclid. We lived in Highland Park. That was the place of our home. And Highland Park is a couple of miles away from that location on 12th Street. However, in the morning when we finally got really aroused back up again as children, we could look over the horizon towards 12th Street and we could see the black smoke. And we could see that smoke and know that our lives would never be the same. That was my father's livelihood in those flames. So as it was, the conflagration continued for days. It was a time much like this. There was a great deal of tension in the air, combined with the heat of the summer, so that many people felt that the heat itself was a harbinger of things to come. And in Detroit, the neighborhoods heaved, and the tension rippled like steam off of it in the neighborhoods where people felt disenfranchised and unequally treated. It was a similar time as what we see today. Let us be clear on that. It was several days later when the police and National Guard allowed us to go back on 12th Street to see what the consequences were of the rage and retaliation. My father had been holding vigil there for day after day until he was disallowed to stand in front of the record shop with his shotgun any longer. When he finally let us go back with him a few days later, we climbed through the debris of once was one of the most seminal record shops in Detroit, with some of the most significant voices in recording history, captured on reel-to-reel tapes. And those tapes were now wet and destroyed. And they slithered like snakes all over the bottom floor of the record store because it was filled with water and debris. I like to say that my father died on that day. Because from that day on, the alcoholism that he was already afflicted with took a significant turn for the worse, as his way of providing for his family was ultimately destroyed. We did not bury him until several years later, but he died on that day. I believe that we are here in a very special time and a very special place because we are Detroit. Detroit is a special place. Detroit is a place that actually changed the way the world moves. It is a place in which people upchuck inventions and change the way that people live. And I believe that here in Detroit, we have a magnificent opportunity to one more time show the world what it is that we do here.
All right.
We make things.
Yes.
And not only do we make things, we make society. We make middle classes. We make peace.
Yes, yes.
And it is within our power to change the narrative of what goes on in many cities and show the world how we're going to do this in Detroit. To learn the lessons that were learned and taught to us in 1967. But in order to learn them, you have to know them. For the first time in history, the Detroit Historical Museum is expressly dedicated to capturing the stories of all Detroiters. The Detroit Historical Museum and its leadership is committed to learning the lessons of 1967, to uncovering truths of 1967 that were heretofore even unknown, and to sharing those truths with the world from all of us. So we are in a very special place. We are in a very special time. I welcome you here for the opening day of what will be a year of reflection, commemoration, affirmation, and deep, deep thought about what it means to be a Detroiter, about what it has meant and what it will mean. I thank you very much for your being here, and I wish you a lovely evening. I thank you very much.
Wow. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Detroit. Good evening. All right. All right. My name is Marlowe Stoudamire. I got notes because there's a lot to cover. And I first want to thank Marsha for your personal reflection and your vision that you shared with us. It's really important, and it's really what Detroit 67 is all about. It's about everyday Detroiters who have a story. It's about people who have their own reflection, their own moment, how it's tied to their family, how it's tied to their legacy, their children, how it matters to individuals. At the Detroit Historical Society, our mission is to tell Detroit stories and why they matter. And I know it matters to you. We all matter. So I just wanted to say that. Again, my name is Marlowe Stoudamire. I'm the Project Director of Detroit 67, Looking Back to Move Forward. And on behalf of the Detroit Historical Society, specifically our president and CEO, Bob Burry in the back, our staff, as well as our board of trustees, we want to welcome you to our open house for Detroit 67. So what is Detroit 67? It depends on how you look at things. As you all know, we are approaching the 50th anniversary of our tumultuous summer of 1967. You can view it as an unpleasant and troubling reminder of an ugly moment in our past, our shared past, that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Or you can see it as an opportunity for diverse voices and communities to come together around the historic effects of a crisis that some of us have lived through, some of us have inherited the after effects, that can help us reinforce the need for us to be united, and can also provide wayfinding for others to find their place in the present in order for all of us to inspire the future. For the Detroit Historical Society, again, whose mission is to tell Detroit stories and why they matter, it's a chance to collect and share oral histories from all perspectives, as Marsha just mentioned. It's a chance to develop a comprehensive museum exhibit that tells an inclusive story and provides opportunities for visitors to get involved in what's moving Detroit forward today. It's a chance for us to get outside of this building and make it matter to people who are not coming here, to people who are in the neighborhoods, people who are away from the 7.2 square miles of downtown and midtown. Detroit is 142.9 square miles. So it's a lot of us who need to be connected to this. And even outside of Detroit, across the region. That's important. It's about engaging partners like the ones represented here tonight that you saw downstairs and to my left. It's a chance for us to change the way that this museum tells history and does business, clearly linking the lessons of our past to today's struggles and opportunities. And if the past 2 weeks didn't tell you anything, we got some work to do. That's really important. For me, as a native son and current resident of Detroit, Detroit 67 is personal and professional for me. I'm working to build the community that I want my kids, who are sitting right there, me and Shelby with my wife Valencia, I want them to inherit it. I want young black males who look like me to be eligible enough and available enough and alive to marry my daughter. I want my son to have a future. That's important to me. And to do this, because none of us stand alone, we have engaged thought leaders, community partners, the business, nonprofit, and policy community, residents of all backgrounds, experiences, and generations from across the region to be a part of this comprehensive effort. You ask how, I'll give you a few examples. For example, we've engaged local and national scholars and diverse community members as part of our curatorial and exhibition development teams to be sure that the history we tell is comprehensive, complete, and balanced. We're not whitewashing anything. We are also working with nearly 100 community partners, many of whom are here tonight, to leverage their expertise and activities in areas of race relations, youth engagement and leadership, neighborhood advancement, and economic inclusion and opportunity to inspire our audience to take action to build bridges and build the community. In contrast of everything that a lot of people believe were destroyed 50 years ago. This is an opportunity for us. We're going to take a step back, but we want to move forward together. We are also involved in something that I think is actually really cool too. We're involved in the 12th Street Collaborative. So at the intersection where many people believe the uprising, rebellion, or riot took place is an old park there. Anybody know the name of that park? Gordon Park. It's right there. It's the last remaining artifact. There's people growing up around here who have no recollection or no connectivity to what actually happened there. But there's also a bunch of grassroots organizations and change makers, including Karissa Development, I saw Katrina here tonight, the 1 Mile Project, Community Development Advocates of Detroit, working with us to actually push memorialization and revitalization efforts in that whole historic 12th Street corridor to show how history can be a launch pad for us to do things differently, connect it back to the people, and never let people forget what happened. We can't leave it behind. So with that being said, I am proud and honored to work with and have such great partners standing here with us today. They are amazing practitioners that do things that we could never imagine doing. Do you hear me? I'm not a social justice expert. We have one to the left. I'm not a math and science whiz. I'm not a business guru. I'm not a DY peer, or do I either run the beautiful Charles H. Wright Museum. But these people to my left have all of those credentials, and they're coming here with us and standing with me today as the leader of a project in which we're convening, but we're all a part of. They bridge cultural, geographical, digital, and generational gaps and are committed to offering opportunities for all of us to participate in the change that I think we all want to see. I hope that's true. So please join me in welcoming a few of Detroit's most dynamic leaders and overall good people to the stage. Starting off with Shirley Stancato, President and CEO of New Detroit. Shirley, come on. Juanita, President and CEO of the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Please join me. The new kid on the block, Tonya, President and CEO of the Michigan Science Center. She's a Detroiter now, y'all. Embrace her. My guy, Ned Staebler, he got a lot of titles. Vice President of Economic Development, Wayne State University, CEO of TechTown, and Detroit Historical Society Board of Trustees. And last but not least, a good friend and someone who's very important to this project, Board Chair and President of the Detroit Young Professionals, Karissa Holmes. And you all met Marsha, who's an award-winning writer and performance artist, who just ushered us in with some beautiful words to get us started and provide context for where we are today. So I got to figure out where I'm going to stand. I'll sit in the middle right here. So what we're going to do is just really walk you through a brief panel discussion around 67 and why these wonderful people are on stage today. So these are not the long answers. Hopefully we'll get some good substance. But we're going to walk through, and I think the first one I'd like everyone to answer, starting with Shirley, working their way down to my left. Shirley, why is it important to reflect and learn from the events of 67 to you and to New Detroit, your organization?
Well, many of you know that New Detroit was So many of you know, or maybe you don't know, that New Detroit was created just 4 days after civil disturbances, the uprising of the rebellion. And so our work on an everyday basis, we realize that we are a response to what happened in 1967. So for us, it's very important, serious, whatever, that we continue that, being that response. But the thing also that I reflect on, and I talk about all the time, in our conference room at New Detroit, we have a picture of the press conference announcing the beginning of New Detroit. And when I tell the story, I say, on the right we have Republican Governor Romney, who called up in the middle, Democrat Mayor Kavanaugh, and Governor Romney said, you know, we didn't see this coming. What can we do? And they tapped a 32-year-old Joe Hudson, who he and his family own the Hudson's Department Store, which is now, I guess, Macy's, and said, do something. And Joe pulled together a group that had never been pulled together before. Grassroots community leaders, business leaders, corporate leaders from around the region, not just Detroit, and said, let's begin to focus on what we can do to improve race relations in our community. And when I tell that story, I said, imagine the fact that this was different parties, Republicans and Democrats, right? City and suburbs, right? Okay, corporate and grassroots community people coming together to make sure that we focus on improving race relations in our community. So it's important for me because it's a really, really a legacy that was created by the folks in this community who said, let's do something. Also, it's a response. People always say to me, you know, we need to do something. And what I say is that doing something that the leadership in this community did was they created New Detroit. 4 days later, there wasn't a committee to study it. They didn't write a white paper and look at it. They said, let's do something. And so for me, that's really important. I'm very proud of the fact that I lead that organization, that we continue to focus on improving race relations. We say it in Detroit that we build economic equity, social justice, and racial understanding in Southeast Michigan.
Juanita?
Okay, can you?
Good question. Why is reflecting and learning from the events of 1967 important to you and your organization?
Okay, I got so engrossed in Shirley's answer that I forgot the question. And it was wonderful. I was learning. I think that it is important because as I think about the Charles H. Wright Museum and the reason Dr. Wright even started this museum and the reason for the other 300 African American museums around the country, that there's always the understanding that African American history could open mind and change lives. And he knew that more than anyone. He knew that it was especially important for our children. And when we think about Marsha mentioned the fact that we need to learn the lessons of 67. It is very clear from the past couple of years that we've not learned the lessons from 67. And so it is important that we continue to commemorate and teach the history, because she said you can't learn the lessons if you don't know it. And this museum, the Charles H. Wright Museum, has been around for 50 years, teaching this history, helping us to understand the importance and the fact that African American history can show the lessons to all people about how things can be different and how we can have an impact and change this country. Think about the Civil Rights Movement. It changed the way every single person in this country lives today. Not just in this country, but it impacted and influenced human rights movements around the world. And it was a movement where people that weren't powerful, weren't famous, did that every individual had the opportunity and the obligation not only just to change this country the way everybody lived, but to force this country to live up to its creed of democracy. And that's what African American museums do every single day. They tell those stories of individuals and the struggles, the accomplishments that they have made, the lives that they have led, that changed this country, and that help not just children, but individuals and everybody understand what's possible in their lives. And so I think by coming back and commemorating and studying, not just 67 in Detroit, but if you will recall, this country was full of rebellion in 67. They were happening around the country. So Detroit was just the Ferguson of the day. But now we need to make sure that everyone understands that what happened in 67 in Detroit, what happened in 67 around this country, that those lessons are still very valuable. You mentioned that there are people who live near the park that don't know anything about 67. So we commemorated to teach those lessons so that we won't continue to repeat it, so that people that, that don't remember, that the people that spewed hatred, that created divisiveness, that that did not understand that every human being had value, as Dr. King did, that we continue to bring that to the forefront. And I think that's why it's important to commemorate 67 and make sure that we understand and learn those lessons.
Thank you. New kid on the block.
In more ways than one. Without giving too much away, I was not born in 1967. I barely made it for the Black Power movement, let alone the Civil Rights movement. And so it is really important that people from that post-movement generation embrace our responsibility in moving it forward. And even as I sit as the helm of the Michigan Science Center, whose entire vision is about looking forward and moving forward, you cannot build your future if you do not know your past. You will simply rebuild your past until you decide to reap the wisdom from it, and only then can you build a future. So as we're coming in, and I'm excited to be a part of this project, project, we're embracing the concept of Detroit 2067, right? Because this is about moving forward. This is the space we need to have to move forward. And I think it's important for me to speak up, to reflect, to be part of the conversation, because those of us who were born in the aftermath, we do care. And a lot of us actually do know. And we are in a position to do something amazing, something grand, something better. And then my question is, so what does technology have to do with any of this? We just let all the people get along, and we just gonna give them an iPod and take a picture of it. But I would like to do more. I am from the East Coast, another urban town like Detroit, Baltimore City, and I see some of the same things. So what does technology, what does urban infrastructure have to do? I remember walking down the street. People lived several blocks, and I don't know, they were fixing the street or economic redevelopment or something, and they took out all the trees. So it was just going to be concrete. And I stood at the top of the block saying, there are no trees. No wonder these people are crazy. I mean, so thinking about the way that we design cities, the way that we design homes, we're designing the way that people interact with each other and the way that they interact with the world. For example, 8 Mile, right? I thought it was a metaphor until I got to Detroit. It is not a metaphor. And those kinds of things are really, really important. So considering the cultural and the personal and the people impact of technology, of urban infrastructure, of design, we can do more than not do harm. I think that we can actually help, and I think that we can be powerful in that. And so that's why I think this reflection is important for someone in my generation and doing what I'm doing right down the street.
Thank you.
Mr. Staebler. So first of all, before I start, I just want to say there are a lot of people here tonight, which I think is fabulous, because I'm going to need your help. I'm going to take a pledge right now that Tonya's only been here 2.5 years, but we're not going to let her leave. Right. So I want all of you to stand up with me and say, she's staying here forever. She's a Detroiter. We got our hooks in her. Our hooks in her. You have any friends from the East Coast you can bring with, just that are like you? So all kidding aside, for me personally, this is important because, you know, the events of 1967 are, in my opinion, the most infamous events associated with Detroit. They're the most talked about. They're something that are really associated with the city, but they're also, in my opinion, the most misunderstood. And they're the most misunderstood because, in a large part, because almost nobody looks at them from every perspective. The city of Detroit in 1967 and before, and even to this very day, remains one of the most segregated cities in the country. And as a result, people growing up aren't exposed to all the different opinions and concepts and situations that existed that led to those events. You know, growing up as a white kid on the northwest side of the city, we called it the riot. And you know, there were buildings that were still burned out, and this is the way we looked at it. You know, we didn't know. And there are other people living in other situations that clearly saw it completely different. So if we're ever going to work on the next 50 years, we have to get people together to hear all sides of the story and understand from a really deep perspective how to not make the same mistakes. So Tonya talked about that kind of notion. I love the fact that it goes all the way back to 1917. That's really important to me. I talk to folks all the time about what's happening in Detroit. And when I talk to them, I started actually in 1950, back when Henry Ford introduced the $5 a day wage. And over the next, you know, people always say 1950 to 2000, 1 million people left the city of Detroit over 50 years. Oh my, 1 million people. From 1950 to 1925, 1 million people showed up. And that's where the problem, that's when 1967 started, because when they showed up to extreme discrimination in housing policy. They showed up to extreme discrimination in hiring policy. It wasn't until 1955 in Michigan when you were finally disallowed from putting out a job offer and saying whites only. 40 years later, after 1 million people showed up and they're crammed into the only areas they were allowed to live in and had to take the worst jobs because they weren't allowed to have anything else. So we have to look at the first 50 years before, not just that 1967 period, if we're going to fix the next 50 years after. And then professionally, I work at Wayne State. Wayne State's been here since 1868. We are Detroit. If Detroit is going to be successful again, which I believe it will be, it has to have a path onto the economic ladder of success for all of its citizens that are here now, for those that are moving here from the East Coast, and for everybody else. And more than ever before, you need a college degree if you're going to be successful in a globalized world like today. So Wayne State has a mission here in the city of Detroit to make sure that we're a university of opportunity and a world-class research institution. And we're going to continue doing that for residents here in the city of Detroit. Well, you know, we say we're an anchor because we've been here since 1868, and we're going to be here in 2068 and 2168 and all that. So that's why it's important to me.
I'm going to have to take Ned on the road with me. Karissa.
So, another confession, I also wasn't here.
We're in 1987.
I'm not going to respond. And neither were any of the 35,000 young professionals, entrepreneurs that DYP interfaces with. So this is a very important opportunity for us to learn. I really appreciate your comments, Dr. Matthews, about how it is important for the young professionals and entrepreneurs to be engaged around this. And in order to be engaged, you have to know about it. I'm also not from Detroit, so I've been here for about 11 years, but I've only heard anecdotal stories about the riots from my grandparents who came up from Florida to work at Henry Ford, from my parents who for a very long time never came to Detroit because they had heard very negative things about it. And living here for the past few years, I really embraced the city. I love living here. I see so much promise. I see people that are so excited and proud of being Detroiters. And we are getting a huge influx of new young people coming into the city who have a very similar background to me. They're not from Detroit, they're young, they've only heard anecdotal stories about Detroit. And so we want to use this as an opportunity to make sure that the lessons that we can learn from 1967 stay on their radar. So that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that we can engage the younger generation around this and that we can be a part of the solution on how we can best move forward.
Thank you. So on this one, we gave you a deep dive. We're going to get quick responses on this one relative to what our partners are actually doing to commemorate, recognize, or just bring people into this whole 50th anniversary that we're recognizing. Marsha, is there anything in particular that you wanted to share with regards to 67 that you'll be doing over the next year, how you're trying to connect with the Historical Society? Anything in particular?
Well, I have been very honored to have been asked early on to participate as a partner with the Historical Museum here. In the overall view of this year's commemoration, but also in the sharing of my own story and the story of my father's business and the underlying issues that were around the time. So I have been very actively involved in oral history that is going to be contributed to this institution, as well as other oral histories that I'm contributing to others. I am also going to be involved in a conference that is going to be organized, that is currently being organized by a number of African American scholars in Detroit who are interested in a particularly African American approach to the 1967 rebellion, as it is also known. And that would be another thing. I have been very much involved in the discussions about the events of that time in a number of forums, online forums and writing, and I will be probably writing a piece that will be specific regarding my experiences during that time. Hopefully, I will have a completed piece by the time by the time of next year. I'll have a completed piece that I'm working on regarding my life as a young person during those times and the relationship of the rebellion to a number of historical factors in the city. There is also a forum that is coming up at the Charles Wright Museum that will be looking at what was called the Kirchhoff Mini Riot, which was a rebellion that took place the year before the 1967 riot in 1966 on Kirchhoff, which in response to police brutality at the time. And that is very widely regarded, where it is known about as a precursor to 1967. So I will be also participating in a forum on that issue.
For those who don't know, Kirchhoff is on the east side of Detroit.
Thank you for us West Siders.
Yes. Dr. Matthews, and I apologize for not doing it before, but Dr. Tonya Matthews, I want to make sure I recognize that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. As Mama Marsha had alluded to before, I think even knowing that, like in the 66 happened before the 67, so that all of us take the last 2 weeks seriously. I'm just saying. So what the Science Center is doing, so I like to play, so we're doing some interesting things. So one of the things is we're putting together a group of people to talk about jobs that are designed to put themselves out of business by 2067. Right, so this is in my sector. So I've got my friend Kirk Mays, who's the head of Forgotten Harvest, which his vision is to eradicate food insecurity. So the idea is that a successful Detroit 2067 doesn't have a forgotten harvest because everybody has food. And so we're putting together a group of folks whose job is technically to put themselves out of business, to sort of talk about what would that take and what would that mean. So some really kind of radical kind of visionary thinking there. And then of course the kids. We're going to have an urban design competition for the little ones, because sometimes, you know, we're used to seeing what we're used to seeing. And you ask a grown-up how do they feel about autonomous driving and cars that drive themselves, and they want to know where the stop button is. They want to know how to get control back of the vehicle, right? They want to know exactly how this car sees. I talked to a 10-year-old boy. He wanted to know if because he didn't have to drive, could his seat turn around so he could talk to the people in the back. So it is an entirely sort of different perspective. Where we're at.
10 years from now, we will all be doing that.
Yes,
Right.
And it's going to be a 10-year-old that comes up with it. So those are the two big things that we'll be doing over the course of the year.
Juanita?
Well, I'll start really quickly, so you can start with us in 2 days. On Saturday at 3:30, we will be unveiling a sculpture by Charles McGee, and it's called United We Stand. I know we are really, really excited. This is a project that Mr. McGee has had in his head to do for many, many years. And we have been very fortunate to be able to get it done right now. He wanted to do this piece to help to think about, because he's someone who always thinks about bringing people together. And so this piece it will open on the exact day of the rebellion. And so Saturday, please come at 3:30. You will have an opportunity to see the unveiling, but also a really good time for food and music and poetry and activities for your kids. Your kids can come and really recreate the sculpture. So come and enjoy it on Saturday. We will have 2 exhibitions, one of which we will be partnering with the DIA, an art exhibition, because I mentioned earlier that this entire country in '67, there were lots of challenges throughout this entire country. And we want to do an exhibition to see how artists looked at all of the rebellions that were going on in this country, and how artists saw these problems, and how they then produced their work that interpreted the challenges that were happening in this country. So we both will be doing art exhibitions that will look at how artists saw what was happening in '67, but also including how artists today are looking at some of the same issues in this country and how they are interpreting it. We will also be doing an exhibition outside that will look at '67 in Detroit, at some of the images of the aftermath of the rebellion, and the stories that go along with it. Marsha told an amazing story of the impact on her family. So the exhibition that we will be doing, that will be outside, and we'll put it outside so that no matter when you want to stop by the museum, whether it's in the middle of the night, early in the morning, you're on your run and you just want to stop and rest and read these stories, look at these images, you can. So we're doing that as well. We will also be doing, this fall, there will be 3 discussions around the lessons that should have been learned in '67 that we did not learn, and as a result today, we are still grappling with the same problems, and what does that mean, and how did that happen? And Tonya talked about the fact that her generation, that they are open and willing to learn, want to help, want to do better. This is an opportunity for that conversation to happen. We will have an entire year-long series of programs, including street performances. You talked about the park. We'll go to the site of Rebellion and actually do programming there. So we're really excited about all the things that's going to be happening over the next year for the Charles H. Wright Museum, and invite you to participate.
Thank you, Shirley.
First of all, I must say that one of the things that we will do is we will continue to do the work that we're doing around focus on closing the gap, education between people of color and whites, and doing work around minority entrepreneurship, building and developing. That's part of the work that we will continue. But I'm really excited to say that talk about the project that we're going to embark upon over the next year. New Detroit was created to, from our perspective, to create racial healing in the community, to look at the police department and have the police department reflect the citizens that they actually are serving and protecting, and to look at entities and organizations and to change the complexion of organizations and leadership in organizations, those kinds of things. So our project is a storytelling, genealogy, and racial healing project. We've already begun on that project, and the project is going to we're the lead organization on it. It's really going to take place in 6 places: Detroit, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Chicago, New Orleans, and 3 counties in Mississippi. Our project, in terms of genealogy, we are going to, there will be a genealogy guide that will help folks do their own genealogy. You've seen all the shows where they bring in sheet of paper and say, here it is, it will teach you that genealogy. But in addition to just doing the genealogy, the historians will take you on a 150 to 200-year look at what was happening in your family, what brought your family to Detroit over that 150 to 200-year history around race, the social, economic, and political conditions that were occurring during that 150 and 200 years. Then in addition to that, so that's the genealogy part of it, we will help individuals tell stories. We are all just a collection of stories. We're talking about this, and people learn from stories. When you go to church, there's stories. As you date, you need to tell a story, or somebody tells a story of you. So people learn best through stories, so we're going to teach you how to tell those stories and to share that information. But then the other part of it that's very unique is the DNA process. We are working with National Geographic, their Genome Project, to do the DNA testing. Because people don't understand that racism created race. Race is a social construct. It is not biological. We are all really there the same biologically, and the DNA will help us see that. It will help see that everybody started in Africa, and then we'll be able to tell our stories along those lines. But from a healing perspective, as we tell our stories, the requirement we're going to have when people go through this is to have 3 storytelling sessions over the course of the year with your family, with your colleagues at work, and we're right now working with some community-based organizations and some business to begin this project. So again, very excited, a racial healing project that will help us see who we are and help us talk to others who really probably don't want to do it. Like, we got a lot of surprises about some folks who signed up, who you probably wouldn't think would sign up, as we begin to help to tell that story in Detroit.
Thank you. Now you see why we're so excited to work with you. Really quick before I go to Ned, if there's one word that keeps coming up, what's the word that you keep hearing?
Right.
Storytelling. We have to control our own narrative, and that's also one of the biggest parts of this project. If all of us are doing something over the next year, when CNN, New York Times, or Time Magazine come in here, they'll be too late. We already got a handle on it.
Right.
Detroiters should tell Detroit stories. Then, quickly.
Sorry, I think the mic back. Really quickly, we're doing hundreds of things at the university, so I'm going to start naming them all right now. So really, we've already started doing some stuff like the Detroit Revitalization Fellows, like Karissa over there. We're doing community conversations at the Detroit Public Theater after the great play, Detroit 67. I got to participate in that. A really great way to get people talking about different perspectives on a play that was sort of demonstrating about what was happening at a real granular level. Then the Detroit Orientation Institute, which is celebrating its 25th year this year, is going to which was created really to change the context when reporters or new people came to town to understand what's happening in Detroit, is going to change all of their programming to be about what's going on in 67. And then also the Van Dusen Urban Leadership Forum, which marries great thinkers in sort of urban issues from around the country with local practitioners here in Detroit for workshops and public lectures, is going to do the same and change its programming to really focus around 1967.
And Detroit Historical Society is also partnering with Wayne State Press to present a companion publication to go along with the exhibition with local and national scholars to take us through the different chapters, like Ned said, that led us through all the way back to the late 1800s to where we are today. Karissa, what are the millennials?
So I guess one thing I should mention is that DYP is a completely volunteer-run organization. So the 40 young professionals, entrepreneurs who help make us do what we do, we all have day jobs. So our primary role in this project is to be a support and to make sure that our millennial entrepreneurs and professionals know what is going on with this project and that they, one, have an opportunity to be involved, and two, become more interested in wanting to get involved. We are working on a very special closeout project in, I guess that's 2017. And Marlowe, I don't know if you want me to give away any secrets.
They got some big stuff coming next year. Just know that the young folks will be here. And we'll set up to get, drinks and coffee for us. We'll boss them around, but they'll be here. So really quickly, we got just 2 quick questions. We're going to go into our speed round. And this is important for us to really kind of set some context around kind of like the yin and the yang. So, Shirley, with regards to where we are today, tell us briefly what keeps you up at night. But then on the flip side, because I'm a glass half full kind of guy, what excites you, or what are you most proud about with regards to where we're going? Fast. They got these questions in advance.
The thing that I'm most proud of and the thing that keeps me up at night really is the same thing. As I look at where we are in our community, I look at the revitalization and things are changing for the positive, and that's all very good, and that's what I'm proud of and I'm looking. But the thing that keeps me up about that is like, who's a part of that change? Who is included in that change? And from our perspective, we want to make sure that everybody is, people of color are included, as well as whites. And so I'm happy about what's going on in our community in terms of the change, but I'm also concerned about who's a part of that change. And that means that our work really continues to be as important as ever to make sure that what's happening in the change is reflective of the people who live and work here.
Juanita?
Well, I think it's sort of the same with me. The thing that I'm most proud of is the promise, the bravery, and the amazing, really energy of our young people. The fact that I see so many young people across the country in Detroit that every time I go to a meeting, that the things that young people are doing in this city just boggles my mind. I mean, I'm just so proud of that. And the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that that they could do so much more if they knew the history, and that I'm so afraid that they're moving so fast, and that they sometimes believe they have all of the answers, that they don't stop to learn those lessons, and that we won't be, that they won't be achieving as much as they could, or creating as much as they could, making as much progress as we could. But the fact that they are so brave and so much promise. I mean, you sit right here next to Tonya, and you go, oh my God. And so, that's all over this city, believe it or not. It really, really is. So that, I'm very, very proud of that, and so hopeful, but it also is really scary bad. She goes, I wasn't born in '67. So, yes.
Dr. Matthews?
I am glad that I am in a safe space so I can finally say the following phrases. Around what keeps me up at night, I am the daughter of a cop, and all of the most important men in my life are African American. Yes. So I sit at this really interesting cusp, and I have never, ever been so worried in my life. This generation wasn't actually raised to be prepared for this particular burden and conversation, and I have to say that I am struggling sort of with that and balancing that. It's very, very hard to be rooting for both sides at the same time, and so that is definitely what is keeping me up at night, from my nephews all the way up to my dad, to my new husband. What makes me excited is the thing that brought me here in the first place, which is that Detroit is so damn resilient, right? So I came here because y'all got attitude problems. But it's the kind of thing that means sort of survival. So I appreciate all the energy that the young people are bringing to the table, but I am empowered every time the elders come out swinging again. And so as I really, really worry about my country, I realize that no one has been through what Detroit has been through, and Detroit is still here. So as long as Detroit is still here and still fighting, my country will survive.
Detroit is a city that has dealt with contradictions, and we are good at that. We live in layers of reality, complexity. We are a city of complexity. So one of the things that keeps me up at night is how to welcome our newcomers into the city. How do we best welcome them? The new young people, the new whites that are coming to the city, while at the same time helping them to understand our history, those of us who were here when they got here. So that is a very significant complexity that I am always dealing with. But it is my joy to deal with it. I believe that I was here for that. And I think that the contradiction that you raised regarding your own father is something that I share, as far as having a parent who was a victim of the destruction of the riot. While at the same time, as a teenager in those years, I was also very close to the rebellion of the time. So I was very, very conflicted at watching my father's livelihood be destroyed, while at the same time understanding that so much of the mayhem that was out there had a material basis. So there are interesting complexities, and I think we are all, as Detroiters, accustomed to dealing with complex problems, because we are the people that come up with complex solutions.
So what keeps me up at night is that talent is evenly distributed across our city, across our region, but opportunity is not. And if we want to have a sustained recovery here in Detroit, we can't have 7.2 square miles of prosperity as an oasis and 140 square miles. So that's what keeps me up at night. But what makes me happy, what gives me hope, what makes me proud is that I work with amazing people at TechTown, at Wayne State, folks that are up here on this stage, the elders that you talked about, Tonya, who keep getting up and swinging because that's what they do. Here in Detroit, we say we hustle harder, and it's true. I know we're not going to let that happen. I know that the folks that I work with every day are out kicking down doors and creating opportunities all across the city, getting out in neighborhoods and talking to people to make sure that they are participating in the recovery and the revitalization that is happening here in Detroit. So that's why I am hopeful going forward.
So I'm going to start with the good. So what excites me is over I've been here, I've seen a lot of positive changes. So 4 years ago, Detroit Professionals was sat in on the Economic Policy Summit, and we talked about some of the reasons we thought Detroit struggled with attraction and retention of young professionals. And we kind of boiled it down to there was a big PR problem. There were a lot of bad stories about Detroit. It didn't seem attractive, particularly when you're coming out of school, you're well educated, you can go to Chicago, you can go to New York, and you can have this big city life. And when I used to meet young professionals who were moving into the city, they were most of the time moving back. They were originally from Detroit, they went to somewhere for school, they worked a couple of years, then they decided to come back home. What excites me is now when I meet new people, they have never been to Detroit before. They've maybe never even visited Detroit before. They don't have family here. They came here because it's now being looked at as a place for opportunity, where if you're ambitious and you have great ideas, it's fertile ground for you to kind of make your own path, and that's what excites me about Detroit. I'm going to echo some of the comments that really worry me. For Detroit specifically, I've always lived in the 7.2 miles, and I haven't always had a lot of opportunities. Well, I'm not going to say opportunities, a lot of interest in traveling outside of that because I'm not from here. But since I have developed such a close-knit group of friends who are from all around Detroit, I've appreciated the exposure. And it's really highlighted why those of us who are privileged to be in the 7.2 need to get out and to help those in the other areas of Detroit have more access to opportunity. And lastly, over the last 2 weeks, as a Black woman, I'm terrified.
All right, so this is the last question, and this is truly the speed round. You cannot say a sentence or a paragraph. You have to say 3 words. So they have gifts for you. So, reflecting on all the turmoil and issues that we're facing as a nation regarding race and other issues, if words were a gift from you guys, and you could only give 3 words as a gift to offer this crowd, the rest of Detroit and America, what would those 3 words be, Shirley? She don't have 3 words. They knew this was coming.
So, since I called Marlowe my son, I'm going to take privilege as a mom to say in our conference room in Detroit, I told you about one picture, but another photo that we have is of Martin Luther King. And it says, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So the words that I can use is that love conquers hate.
Thank you. Juanita's going to pass, just like they did at the convention the other night. Michigan passes. You didn't see that up at the National Convention.
All right, Shirley got words, but she was
3
alive
words.
in 1967, so.
And she went to Duke. She should know how to do this.
Right, I'm gonna have to add some action.
All right. The base, the bones, and the babies.
All right.
Black Lives Matter.
I'm going to say educate, participate. Don't drop it on that one. And self-help. And if anyone wants to talk to me about that later, since I can't say anything else.
I didn't cheat, look at the questions earlier today. So you said that, but 3 words came right in my mind instantly, which was love each other.
So with that being said, I'd like to thank our wonderful panel for their time. And so to close this out, before I get into the wrap up, this is my keep it real moment. I care about this. I'm not here for the money. I could work anywhere. I could do anything. There's a team of people here at the Historical Society that are working their tails off every day to try to make something come to life that didn't exist. The model that we're creating, if you Google it, it doesn't exist. The way that we're trying to convene based on the history of this organization is new. We've made some mistakes, and we're getting some things right. We need patience, we need your support, and we need you to stand with us along this journey. There are no wrong answers when you're really leading with your heart, you're trying to do the right thing. Have some tolerance. Give people some grace. Not just in this room, outside of this room. Don't look at the first opportunity to jump on somebody when they say something wrong. We have to allow people to make mistakes in this world. We have to allow people to be able to communicate, as Shirley would say, in a safe, no-fault environment. What we do today and how we carry this message out is on us. The power of one, the individuality that you have to be able to spread this message, but more than anything, how we lead after July of 2017 and how the world watches us. They're looking, they're learning. Detroit is the classroom. And so whether you've been here for the first time today or you've come years before, we encourage you to return often and take full advantage of some of the events and programs and educational components that we're working with along with these partners. I invite you to tell and share your stories with us, to get information on the work that they're doing, the rest of our other partners, and how we can all collectively move Detroit forward. So some housekeeping. Downstairs, Detroit Public Television is actually here for people with memories from '67. If you want to share today, you can. You can give an oral history. If you weren't here, there's going to be opportunities for you to talk about what moving forward looks like and how we need to think about that. We'd love for you to visit our Detroit 67 booth to learn more about that project, share the input around our programming, and add a piece to that puzzle that we're putting together in the lobby. And again, all of this is on the lower level. You can go to our website at Detroit1967.org. There will be plenty of media opportunities in the future. Juanita talked about something that's coming up in 2 days. We're going to be working hard to connect with these partners up here. But before we leave, I'd like for everyone that's on staff at the Historical Society, the museum, and all over, just to raise your hand so people can see that it's not just me standing up here. It's a large team and a crew that's working on behalf of Detroit. And we're just trying to get it right. And we need all the support love we can get. Lastly, I want to thank our panelists for doing what they did. Give them a round of applause. And don't forget that there's street drinks here with ice cream to sell. And there's also some great food from Louisiana Creole gumbo. And I hope everyone was able to connect, and I hope it was meaningful for you. One word that I'll leave you with